You are listening to the Hammersy Brothers e-commerce podcast. Like what you hear and want to take the shortcut on your e-commerce growth? Join hundreds of brands that work with us and head over to joinhb.com. That's joinhb.com and see how we can help you further. Join our members and smash your targets and unlock the profits within your e-commerce site. Good morning.
Good evening.
How are you?
You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah. We're gonna answer 3 questions, and I'll tell you the questions. 3 or 2 or 1 question, depending on what we get through, depending on the end of it. But I'll read the 3 questions. So, what advantage do we have as a small business owner to compete with the big businesses that dominate ads? Because this is, they've been talking to quite a few people who've been asking this because they're coming into markets where there's lots of big incumbents. The next question is someone who's about to take on wholesale. They've got quite a good B2C channel. They think that need to do wholesale. Well, they want to do wholesale because they can see that other people do it and they do well with it. So what's the biggest trap when taking on wholesale as a channel? And then the third question is just how do you overall maximize profit? Because there was I was talking to Dave the other day, and he was basically saying, well, I'll do really well during my peaks, but my profit over the year seems to kind of massively vary depending on when I look at it. So what am I doing wrong? So those are the 3 questions we're going to answer today, and we'll get into that.
Good. Good questions.
So the first question: what advantages do small business have over to compete with the big businesses that dominate ads? Do you want to start with that one?
Okay, yeah, I'll give you my opinion on that. So I think there's a mistake I think people make when they're running a business, particularly an e-commerce business, in that thinking that they've got to look big in order for people to trust them. And I think because we talk about trust and credibility quite a lot, you need to show evidence of trust and credibility. So and I think sometimes people think that they can't put themselves out there because then they're going to look like a one-man band. And I think the traditional forms of marketing, if we go back before e-commerce was existed, you can kind of see that a little bit with certain, if you were buying from a one-man band, it was considered to be untrustworthy. And I think, but I think it's different. It's almost a secret weapon if you are a small business, because if you think about what you need is you need personality. You need to demonstrate that you are trustworthy, and the best way you can do that often is by actually using yourself, because it's free, and it is a shortcut to a brand, because a brand stands for really reassurance that it's going to be okay. That's what a brand is. And when you put yourself out there, it is showing reassurance that it's going to be okay. So it kind of leads to the brand. And but I think people are reluctant to do it because you can understand why. We had a chat with it was goat milk. It's a really great business in America who we've been working with for several years now on the level 2 program, and they've scaled really well. And we've started to talk to them about doing much more video content, and they said, "Look, we totally agree, but we're not sure if we feel comfortable on camera." And and you can understand that. Some of them said we do, some of them said we don't. So I think there's that sort of worry, I suppose, of how they're going to come across and how people are going to perceive them, and so they kind of hide. Sometimes you find businesses hide, but I think generally the reason why people don't put themselves out there is often because they're uncomfortable and they think it makes them look smaller or less regarded than a bigger brand. That would be my take on it. But it's often the cheapest, easiest way, especially if you've got a following.
Well, I think if you think about the high street, like that physical stores, the reason that people would buy from a smaller store is if they knew the owner. And so if you really, that's your one advantage over going to a hardware store that sells, B&Q, a big hardware store, compared to, Ian's hardware store. If you know Ian and he knows like damp-proof coursing, and you've got to do something that in your house, and he's going to go and talk to you, that's the advantage of the small business owner. And so it's the same as online, is that if you can build a connection with the founder, then people will buy from you because they want to be part of the movement of what you're trying to do. And I think that, there's been many times when I've kind of been reluctant to put myself out there and do things, but every time I've done it, it's like, well, I've always thought afterwards, why the hell I haven't done that earlier? It was just stupid. I was just afraid of nothing. Now, of course, you're going to get people mocking you on social media, on Facebook ads, but they are not normal people. Those people, they're just, it's almost like putting yourself, imagine if you stood on the corner of a town centre, some people would heckle you because they are just, they're never going to be your customers.
I think the other consideration, I think, is, do you embody your customer? And what I mean by that is, if let's say you're really into mountain biking, and there's a guy, we've got a couple of people working, who sell, really high-end mountain bikes. They love mountain biking.
Yeah.
They look like the customers they are selling to. So they're absolutely right to be the face and the founder and to put the content out and do videos and interviews, because they look like the people that are buying from. And there's loads of examples where that's true. But sometimes there's a mismatch if you don't look like your customers. And then that's slightly odd. Then, so let me say, there's a business we're working with, and they, it's a guy, and he bought a big homeware business, and because he's an investor and he's a big business guy, and he doesn't look like the women who are buying the product, and this particular business is 90% women. He doesn't look like them. So would it be right for him to put out there?
Yeah, I think you've got,
question it.
Most people do fit the brand that they're selling. Some people don't. Like, I was talking to I've got a personal trainer, and he was talking to me one day, and he says, yeah, you don't ever get any fat personal trainers. You're just like, it's not what you aspire to be, is it?
Can't
like,
say that.
Well, these are his words, Ian. That
well, you should start that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said
this.
I
said,
my membership.
Marty, you can't say this. But he said it. But he is right. Like, you go to a personal trainer because you feel like they are going to make you fit, and you want them to look fit, don't you? That's what you want. So there are businesses where it wouldn't necessarily work, but most of the time, the founder is reluctant, probably for the wrong reason, of putting themselves out there. And particularly if you like, there's one business we're working with where, like, she does her own art. And she was saying, do I need to be in the ads? And it's like, well, you are the brand. Like, so of course you do. Like, that's what people are buying. They're buying into you as the artist. And if any business needs you to be in the ads, it's you more than anything. Because with art particularly, people are invested. They want to get invested in the making of the pieces.
Yeah.
Because that's when they fall in love with it.
In the Meta workshop that you did, a few weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you're talking about why the founder-based ad works, and the founder-based ad, the thing, you said that the thing, when you started talking about the founder-based ad script, so the founder-based ad script is a Meta video script that we've written, which we give to people that we think is relevant to the founder-based. And when you did the script, you said some of the mistakes people were making is they started talking about themselves and why they started the business in terms of their own personal gain. Like, I was just sick of my job, and now I'm rolling in it, and I don't have to do 9 to 5.
You can give me money too.
Yeah. That's the founder based story should be, I've been where you are, and let's say you were selling like the Harrier, let's say the Harrier Run Free, she was like saying, she was really into trail running, and she was where you were to be getting into trail running, and she was looking at ridiculously expensive brands in the shops, and they were like £200-300 for a basic trail running kit. And she's like, this is just ridiculous. And I really want to get into trail running, but I can't. The prices are just for elite professional male athletes. It's totally ridiculous. There's nothing in my market, and that's the founder stories. She said, I was where you are. Didn't know where to start, and then that's how she. And that's a really compelling founder story because she's resonating with where people are emotionally.
The founder story
that's a good example.
It's a vehicle. It's a trust vehicle. It's a vehicle that allows you to create trust to tell them what's in it for them. That's what it is. The trouble is with when people go the founder story based ad, they think, I'm the founder, I want to tell my story. And nobody cares, really. Apart from maybe your family and stuff like that. But like people are, they're much more interested in their own journey, aren't they? Yeah, so basically the advantage is that you can create that personal connection with the brand, which the big brands can't. I mean, John Lewis can't, the CEO of John Lewis doesn't walk around John Lewis picking up the products, talking about them and why they chose them and all that kind of stuff. It's just, because
And I think it's much nicer to follow a founder who you believe is doing, is on a mission to do something that is good.
Yeah.
And rather than just a brand, a generic corporate brand, it's much easier to identify and tap into a human's mission rather than a corporate brand. I think that is the part. And I think, look, we're in an age where we are trying to get a highest return on ad spend as we can, and if you can use you and your personality, and you can really you can understand the emotions of where your customers are, and you can connect with your customers on an emotional level because you understand where they are. That's so powerful compared to you're trying to create a corporate brand and you're trying to get people to believe that stands for something. And I'm not saying you can't do it, but it often needs a lot of money and a lot of time to create that vision of that brand, and lots of cash. And if you can just shortcut it with you putting your founder, you might be able to get the business from 0 to 10 million on that founder based, putting yourself out there, and then you sell the business. And the other worry is, I think, in fact, I was about to say, then you sell the business, and then everyone else, whether or not building a brand around yourself, that's the other concern, is, do I build a brand around myself? I won't be able to sell it. And I think that's a misconception as well. And I think in some respects it becomes...
There's loads of brands have been sold.
Loads of massive brands. Marks and Spencer, you just mentioned it. Ellis Brigham, those loads of brands have been based around the founder. I think lots of sports brands. I think like the ones we were mentioning, like Solomon. I mean, it's pretty hard not.
Once you get to a certain size and you get a certain amount of customers and people believe in the mission takes over, and it's less about the founder. And as long as you're keeping it ongoing, it becomes good. And the other thing that holds people back is they think that they need to, if they do content and videos and things like that, they think that it needs to be slick. Now, of course, if you're selling something that's absolutely beautiful, like a wedding dress or something incredibly aspirational, aesthetics are important. But like most of the time, ugly sells. Like if you're selling like a homemade soap or something like that, like they just want to see that. They want to see the rawness of it.
When you say ugly sells, I think what you mean is it's more authentic and it's more credible if it's been shot in a way that it is either a genuine customer or it's genuine, it's the owner. And I think you're right. So I think there's probably a bit of a subtlety in what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just like sometimes an ad
you're saying
filmed on an iPhone, walking,
because it's more
walking along a
authentic.
path,
That's really
talking about the product.
Yeah.
It's just fine. Yeah.
It's definitely true. Yeah.
Okay. Should we move on to the second question?
Yeah, sure.
What is the biggest trap when taking on wholesale as a channel?
Okay. So you're saying you are, just to put into context, the question is that you're a direct to consumer brand, you're an e-commerce brand, you're selling to consumers, and a wholesaler, or you approach a wholesaler, or they approach you.
I think there are people are starting to approach you and saying, "Oh, we really like to stock your products."
Yeah, which in some respects you go, "Oh my god, this is amazingly great volume." The considerations are obviously the practical realities of stock. Do you need to do this? Are you running out of stock? What's going to happen to your stock? Stock levels. Secondly, and probably most importantly, is the pricing architecture, and if that changes, because most of the time they're going to want a wholesaler margin. So you got to figure out, have I got the margin to do so? That is a consideration. And are they going to mess up the price? That's probably the biggest one, isn't it?
So I think you've got to be very careful who you take on, and if you can sell to people who are like outside of online. So like if you've got like a big store in London or something like that, like that's great because they don't necessarily sell a lot online. They're just people footfall and it's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Like what you don't want is because if you're spending a lot of money on meta ads and driving your brand, and then people are then coming onto Google and typing your brand and then start buying off that wholesaler and you get half the amount of money from it, that's not ideal. So you really want to protect that. And there are wholesalers who you say, well, you can buy from us, but you're not allowed to bid on our brand name. That's one of the caveats to stocking our brand.
What? Over the years, I have seen brands get this wrong, and it's taken years to unravel. The mess of the trade, and the worst particular example was somebody that sold to a buying group. So they got approached by a buying group. They were selling, aftermarket car related accessory stuff, like webcam, dash cams and stuff. And they were selling to some wholesale brands that were well respected and they were fine. There wasn't really an online, but then they sold to a buying group, and that buying group sold to all the third parties on eBay and Amazon.
Can you explain what a buying group is? They represent loads of small sellers, don't they?
Yeah.
And then they buy together to allow them to get the bulk discount.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And obviously the internal, the sales team internally went, "Oh my God, great, we've got this, multi-million-pound contract." But it was made up of lots and lots of these small little sellers, and there was no consideration for what would happen online, and it absolutely buggered the entire online business for a period of years after that decision was made. Years. Because what would happen is that the eBay sellers would stock the product on eBay as a new product. Amazon would price match against the new, so they're selling on their own website, as trying to get the full margin of whatever, 60 quid. eBay would come along and undercut everybody because it would be this one small little business that would be selling on eBay. Amazon would price match off eBay. Everybody, Argos and Screwfix and all the others would price match off Amazon, and the whole market just went screwed because of it was a knock-on effect.
And if I remember rightly, the buying amount of that buyer group, or bulk buy group buy, I can't, what do you call them? Was so big internally that it became a political thing.
Yeah.
So they were like, well, I get commission inside the company from selling to this buyer group, so I don't want to let it go. But actually, what was happening was that buyer group was essentially undercutting the price that they were allowed to sell it online to their on their own business, and so therefore you'd got this kind of like wheel of pain where it was just stupidity, but nobody wanted to do anything about it. So it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So you've got to be very careful. And I think you want to sit down with the rules of what you're going to do with your wholesale channel. And you particularly want to protect your own brand in the marketplace and be very careful who you take on to make sure that they aren't just going to be someone who's just going to list it on a Shopify store or eBay store and just bid on your brand, because that's adding no incremental value. You want someone who's actually going to be stocking your product and introducing your brand to huge amounts of new people that have never seen it before, their email list, and it's going to work. And you don't want them bidding on brand because like you're doing all the work for them. And then you've got, like, a lot of people then come to us and say, well, that's the situation they're in. And it's like, well, how do we sell our own direct without undercutting our wholesale channel? And we've done a lot of that. Like, there's lots of strategies for that. But it's nice to not get into that situation in the first place so that you don't even have to have that consideration.
Yeah.
But, I think that's the biggest is taking on the wrong wholesalers they're just there to take arbitrage on your brand.
Oh, they're almost like affiliates almost in a way, clipping the ticket, just taking the sale in the end. There's no risk whatsoever. They're just getting in the way, and just stealing business from you really. And of course, you don't own the customer. You don't know who they are.
Yeah, so you can't contact. Launch new products, can you, into the list?
No. So you're really careful about it. You got to really question: is this going to add, complexity, and is it going to really restrict my future marketing plans? Because you can lose control. I mean, the
reason that people do it,
about how you unravel it.
The reason you want to do it is because it can get you to volume much more faster. And you can kind of take bedding envy, right? We had to get to a certain volume before we got our own production run in the factory. So we'd have a whole loom to ourselves. And we didn't need to go to wholesale to do that. But like if we could have been in that situation where we go, if we do some wholesale, we can have a bigger order. We get that fat bit of cash coming in at the beginning, and then it kind of makes work. So that I can see the advantage of it. Like there's definitely the pull of it because it does help your numbers. It does help your cash flow. You just got to be very careful what deal you're getting into effectively. So yeah.
Cool.
The third question: how do you maximize profit? So this is a kind of overall. We've talked a lot about this actually, in terms of like pushing your peaks, but actually, overall, I think that there's some nuance to it. Do you want to talk to that?
Well, I just read the question properly again.
Well, that is the question.
Because you just said, how do I maximize profit? Is there no more context to it?
Okay. Well, hang on. Let me just have a look. So, So they basically, this was the guy that
Dave.
Basically, he's basically looking at the years and years, and he's saying that sometimes he does really well on his peaks, and sometimes he doesn't do as well. But overall, his profit seems to kind of come up and down, and it's like vary wildly depending on other factors. And so, this is one we looked into it with him, so we know the answer. But I thought it'd be interesting to kind of bring it out. And do you want me to give the answer, or do you want to do it?
Well, I tell you, I'll give you the question was, how do I maximize the profit? And I talked about this on one of the workshops I did the other week, and I said the biggest thing, the biggest thing people don't take advantage of is the natural cadence, rhythm, seasonality to their e-commerce business, and genuinely it's pushing harder when they can and pulling back when they can't. And when I say when they can, we mean, can they achieve the ROAS that we've set in the margin calculator, which is based on margin and lifetime customer value, which basically sets how aggressive you should be with your return on ad spend, for new and existing. And there'll be factors like trying to sell a Christmas tree in July. You can't sell Christmas trees in July because nobody wants a Christmas tree. So, what should you do with your marketing spend? Not zero. And that's an extreme obvious example that, what's your ROAS going to be in July? It's going to be, it's going to be zero. It's going to be, your cost of acquisition will just be ridiculous. So unless you're selling wholesale, because people do buy Christmas trees in July ready for the Christmas, but no, this is not wholesale. This is just direct to consumer. So in that example, generally you have to know two things. You've got to know what your new customer ROAS should be. And then you've got to make sure you ride that wave whilst you can. You pull back when you can't, and you go harder when you can, and you're adjusting that daily. So that's the helicopter view. What's your take? Because you said something interesting before about you can lose more money in your downturns than you can.
Yeah, that's what I found from running my own businesses, is that I can lose more profit. I can lose more. So let's say I've got a seasonal business, a semi-seasonal business, like let's say homeware, right? Homeware does really well at Christmas and November and build up to that, and maybe okay in January, but doesn't do particularly well in July, June, okay? So I can obviously maximize my peaks. We've talked about that as much as we can, but it's actually as easy to lose money during your troughs and actually lose more profit by trying to chase some revenue. And so the ability to maximize profit is, first of all, maximizing your peaks as much as possible. But second of all, like minimizing your losses. And it's actually almost more important to have the conversation with yourself to see, well, what am I doing during these lean months? Because that's when I lose the most profit. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to make it back in Christmas and I'm going to make it back at this time. But there's probably more things I could do to minimize the loss during those leaner months. Like, do I need the agency that I've got during that time? Like, if it's just super simple ads, do I need that staff? Can I kind of become a little bit more of a on-demand leaner business for those things? Do I need to do let's say I'm doing like 500,000 in Christmas in December, and in my leaner month I'm doing like 50 grand, right? Do I need to do 50 grand that month? Like, am I trying to push it for the sake of it?
I'm going to just say one other thing. There's a couple of businesses where you can create the seasonality. There's two businesses that we've got on level 2 right now. And one of them is something like a hobby crafting kit, really beautiful, really high end. And they do very, very well at two periods of the year. One was like a sale they did in like springtime, and one was the November sale, and it was like huge peak in those periods, and then really quite like nothing, and then until this. And so we're looking at that going, well, why don't you just do another one? You've got two massive peaks here and here, in November and your spring. Why don't you just do another one in the middle? And then, of course, you might take a little bit from the peaks, but overall,
you can usually add a third peak, can't you, for an anniversary sale, birthday sale, something like that.
Yeah, there's no problem there. So, yeah, I think you can. There are things that we're basically saying lean back as much as you can in everything when the demand isn't there, but also question yourself as what can I be doing to create some of the seasonality again. But that's not always possible. But I think sometimes it's really it is. And in fact, there's another one, and an art-based business which again had exactly the same thing.
Let's say take skiing equipment. Like, people have done skiing equipment. They've done the summer end of season sale, and like the at last year's lines and things like that. They can sell off lots of stuff, and they can go to the wholesalers and actually all the brands and say, what have you got? What do you want to sell? And they don't even necessarily need to stock it. They say, well, we've got all of these boards and you can sell them for this, and we'll just ship them to the customer. And so there's lots of opportunities in those down months to kind of create something almost out of nothing, as long as you kind of your kind of offer architecture hat on there and work out what you can sell, because it is believable. Like I accidentally, for one homeware brand I was doing, I accidentally turned on the Christmas ads in July, and I sold loads of Christmas stuff. And so it is interesting what you can do.
Don't say that, because that's going against my my Christmas tree analogy.
Yes, I know, but what it was is some people hate Christmas so much that they actually get it organized in July, so then they kind of feel like it's done. Like they literally organize it that far in advance. So yeah, there's a section of the population.
I would ignore everything Mark's just said.
Thank you. Yeah, but if it sells,
Christmas campaign on now.
If it sells,
well, test it, turn it on, and then if it doesn't work, you can send the bill to Mark.
Yeah, but I will look at the bill. I won't pay it.
No.
Yeah. So no. I think it's more about, like we were saying, maximizing profit is effectively you've got those two extremes. You've got your highlights and you've got your lowlights, and those are the two areas where you need to have the most focus. Like usually in the middle, you're like you can making profit, you're doing okay, but it's those two extremes where you either don't chase enough revenue during your peaks, and you chase too much revenue during your troughs for the sake of it.
I actually think the biggest mistake in terms of the seasonality was saying, generally you can spend, they're spending too much in the troughs and not enough in the peak. I think most people actually are, if it was one of those things, it tends to be they don't spend enough in their peak. That's probably the primary message here. Is that because they look at the let's say the cost of acquisition. You figured out your cost for acquisition. Let's say you're selling something that's £100. You got a margin of 60%. Let's say, I don't know what the cost of acquisition based on on that. I need to check the margin calculator. Let's say cost of acquisition is like £25, and in your peak, your cost of acquisition might be £10. And you go, oh my god, yeah, cost of acquisition is only £10. Well, you could have gone to 25, and so you could have spent more, And so that tends to be where people will look back and go, oh, my return on ad spend was really high, and it's like shutting the shop.
I think that
early.
That certainly the step change between year on year and actually getting to a next level of revenue. The time when you do it is during those peaks. That is when you kind of make the biggest difference to actually turn the business into the next level, the next step. And that is done by getting your peaks right. Yeah. Like it's not like for bedding now, like it's not now. Like we're doing well, we're doing up on year, but what will happen is we'll know a lot more about where the business is in the latter half of the year.
It's when I tell people on the workshops, and I tell people about the bedding, one of our brands, the bedding brand, and I show people, I say, do you know what we spent in November last year, 2024 November, we spent £119,000 on ads, and it's quite a reasonable number, but at the time. There was absolutely no risk whatsoever in that. It was completely calm and relaxed, and because we knew exactly to the penny each day what we could and should be spending, and we pushed because we knew we could, and we got 432,000. Pounds in November, and so this year, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because we'll obviously be expecting bigger things, and now that we know that's when that's a huge month for
it'll be the step change to the next level.
Yeah, it will be the step change. So and we're building up to that moment because we're capturing emails a lot. We're planning it. We've planned it all. We know what we're going to sell. We know what we're doing. We've got the stock. You know,
Hopefully
so we'll be
have
expecting
our AOV strategy in place with our bedding is so complicated. It seems so easy, and yet, if you think about it, you've got all the different sizes, all the different modules and variants and stuff, and then it gets so complicated so easily.
Different thread counts, different colours. And you know what? We didn't realise, this is how stupid we are. You know, we obviously own a bedding brand, and we were like, well, we can start selling bedding in France now, in Germany. Well, this would be great, you know, sheet's a sheet. No, they have different bed sizes. And obviously,
everybody has different bed sizes. America has different bed sizes. Australia has different bed sizes. Why can't we just... Why people aren't that different?
No. But obviously, you know, we didn't know this, which was...
I knew that the bed sizes were different in England to New Zealand, because when I came over here and brought everything over here 16 years ago, the bed I had, I couldn't buy a new mattress for it because the mattresses were too... I think the mattresses were too big. They wouldn't fit in the bed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, IKEA's got different mattresses, hasn't it, in England? But anyway, there's a different array of mattress sizes, which is annoying.
Yeah.
Bed sizes. But anyway, it's completely irrelevant. But we're basically saying the biggest mistake often is when we look at people's numbers, because when we do the deep dive, the first thing we look at is the previous 3 years, and we're looking at whether or not you could have moved budget around to different places at different times of year and for a greater return. That's the first thing that I and you will look at. We're going, well, you know, you should have moved budget from Google to Facebook there, or you should have moved budget from that time in the year to that. You should have moved it 3 months ahead, and you could have, if you'd spent that, and you would have, you'd have had another £100,000 profit, and it's that bloody obvious when you're looking back. And we look at it all. We're looking at new customer ROAS, what we spent, how many new customers we got, overall ROAS, for each month in the last 3 years, and it's the pattern is night and day. And just by doing that, and then looking ahead and going, right, if we had spent that, this is what we think we would have done. I mean, it's bloody obvious when you're looking at it, because obviously it's very interesting. We can see it because we were looking at so many. But that's a pattern I see often, is that people don't maximize the peaks hard enough in every regard: ad spend, email, events, social.
Anyway, thank you very much.
I can tell by your face you're as riveted in this as everyone else is.
Yay! All right.
Great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'll let you
I'll
go.
speak to you soon. Speak to you next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.